Folks, I'm a simple man. I like my beer cold, my coffee strong, my steaks medium rare, grilled, seasoned, bit of salt, freshly cracked pepper. I like a good scotch over rocks, smooth, well-aged bourbon neat, and a martini dry with 2 olives. I like when the Red Sox win, the Yankees lose. The lady walks into a room, I stand up. She leaves, I hold the door. When the national anthem plays, I take my hat off. When Morgan Fairchild followed me on Twitter, I went to the cemetery to tell my father about it because I knew he'd be more proud of that than anything I'd actually accomplished recently. And when the director of RoboCop, Black Book, Basic Instinct, Total Recall, Soldier of Orange, Elle, Showgirls, and Starship Troopers makes a movie about horny lesbian nuns going psycho in a 17th century Italian convent, I'm gonna watch the hell out of that movie.
Dieu te quittera.
Renonce à ta vanité. L'amour.
Alors, ce menteuse! Putain!
Dieu te parlera dans beaucoup de langues. Ça m'effraie.
Any good?
Very good.
It won the Academy Award
Oh, for what?
for Best Movie Ever Made.
Loosely based on the life of Benedetta Carlini, a 17th century heretical mystic nun as detailed in 1986 by Judith C. Brown in her nonfiction bestseller Immodest Acts, The Life of a Lesbian Nun in Renaissance Italy, director Paul Verhoeven's latest is something like a follow-up to Elle in that he's back in France with a cadre of respected actresses, including from that very film, doing something that looks like on the surface a respectable French drama, but underneath more like the expensive, classier version of something much more salacious and sleazy. But whereas Elle was more like dressing up a dark revenge whodunit in the trappings of a first, much more subdued, meditative suburban drama that only gradually revealed, oh, we're not dealing with who or what we initially thought we were, are we? Benedetta is aiming more directly at the target of here's the kind of semi-true events that inspired the so-called nunsploitation genre of softcore sex and violence films of the 70s and 80s throughout the European grindhouse circuit. Maybe since it's 2021, we got a few classy actors to turn up a more upmarket version of, oh, no, we're just doing the more expensive version of exactly that, huh? So yeah, in case you were expecting the Mad Dutchman to show up on the 21st century festival circuit with this material and hand in something other than an attempt at A Man for All Seasons of blasphemous fingerbanging potboilers, no, that's exactly what he's offering here, an over-the-top tale of entirely too good-looking for the mid-1600s French actresses shedding their habits, shrieking while possessed by Christ, demons, the blessed virgins, the throes of sapphic passion, or all of the above, and engaging in acts both carnal and surreal, sometimes as dream sequence, sometimes as reality, in the context of internecine backstabbings and also front stabbing that frames convent life and church politics as a mix of lesbian boarding school romantic melodrama and mean girls power jockeying with a garnish of backstage dramatics a la Black Swan and or The Red Shoes, or if one prefers the more direct inside joke, they might note that the eventual Queen Bee power play plot and focus on elaborate liturgical stagecraft so central to Renaissance Catholicism ultimately means he's just kind of made Showgirls again, but with hot nuns this time, and, geez, Paul, I didn't even get you a card last year. What a guy, I'll tell you. All of which is just delightfully fun on its own exploitation movie merits, hitting all the reliable beats up to and including public floggings, burning at the stake, schemers peeping on the naughty business through comically ill-concealed spy holes, multiple public plague panic riots, a prophetic comet, suicidal leaps of madness, stigmatic catfights, fever dream visions of a sexy action hero Jesus splattering knaves and servants with a broadsword or beckoning Benedetta herself into a romantic tricks on the crucifix itself, and that's all after the multiple sequences of a young Benedetta summoning animals and statues of the Virgin Mary to her aid with prayer like a fire and brimstone Disney princess before any of the sleazy business can even enter into the proceedings. Story-wise, deposited by her wealthy but not that wealthy parents at a small convent in counter-Reformation Tuscany as a youth, Benedetta grows up convinced of a personal connection with the Blessed Virgin and visited by increasingly, let's say, personal, quasi-apocalyptic visions of Christ, while establishing her own presence as a devout go-getter among her peers and featured figure of lavish mass presentations. Her story takes a turn when she convinces Charlotte Rampling's stern yet cynical and more than a little cunning herself Mother Superior to admit a fleeing peasant abuse survivor seeking shelter named Bartolomea into their ranks for protection, only for the adventurous, spirited girl's presence and affections to spark urges and attractions within her that seem to supercharge Benedetta's already supposed extraordinary connection to the spiritual realm to outright mystical stature. Soon enough, she's not only claiming to commune with the saints, but speaking with possessed voices, bursting with stigmatic wounds at her hands and feet, performing possible miracles, and calling down predictions of doom and or salvation from on high as a resurgent black plague rages outside the city gates and a comet appears in the night sky. All of which draws the attention of the higher church and fractures the rest of the convent on believer and skeptic lines as a power struggle emerges between the maybe not living saint in their midst and Rampling's decidedly not buying it Mother Superior, elevating Benedetta herself, who very much does believe her own hype, to dizzying heights of power, but also placing her and her lover in mortal danger, since she also seems resolutely committed to her belief that her heaven-sent mystic powers are being unleashed in confluence with and the blessing of her and Bartolomea's amorous explorations of one another, and you probably do not have to look up the actual historical events of this to know that the Catholic Church was not super eager to co-sign that particular interpretation. But if all Verhoeven had on his mind was showing everyone that he had the technical chops and command of multiverse translates your film language to conjure what if Jess Franco had made Black Narcissus from the multiverse of cinematic hypotheticals, Benedetta would only be about half as entertaining as it actually is, and to be certain, even if one is approaching the material strictly from a reptile brain space of eagerness to see Virginia Fira and Daphne Patachia climb all over each other in chambers, it must be said both actresses are adeptly cast to walk the line between subverting old-time Eurosleeves kitsch and simply participate in it with more talent and budget. Afira has the showier part in the lead role as Benedetta, obviously, but Patachia, a relative newcomer to the big international productions from Greece, is a commanding second as Bartolomea, gifted with an unnervingly piercing stare that you can almost believe was enough to drive another woman to a state of psychospiritual crisis, basically after like a day of just hanging around the place. But what's really going on here under all the lurid button-pushing and cavalier hurling of lavish production value at what on paper might otherwise have looked like the outline of softcore erotica, in some moments it almost feels like someone tried to turn the Castle Anthrax sequence from Monty Python and the Holy Grail into a super serious sequel to a comedy, a la Ghostbusters Afterlife, except Benedetta is also actually funny, ends up being Verhoeven getting out a sly, often witty discourse on the nature and function of religion itself in between some of the most openly come-at-me-bro blasphemous imagery an 82-year-old director is likely to throw at audiences this decade, as the plot steers into the skid of the obligatory tortures and tribulations witch trial third act, where all stories like this must inevitably end up, even when not based on true account, because really what else was going to happen here? The story reveals itself as a nesting doll of Emperor's New Clothes scenarios wherein no one but Benedetta herself actually seems to believe anything about her faith, their own, or anyone else's completely, instead framing the world of medieval Catholicism as a political game of poker-faced fake-out, where everyone is trying to see who blinks first as a scenario of escalating madness spins out of control, and everyone from the Mother Superior to Lambert Wilson as a late-arriving villainous papal nuncio seems willing to play along at using the local parishioners' belief in a mystic madwoman to advance their own interests, right up to the point they realize Benedetta might be capable of having used them. Or maybe she's actually what she says she is. Blasphemy is fun after all, but it's much more quintessentially in Verhoeven's own zero subtlety but somehow still leave them guessing wheelhouse that one can come away from Benedetta feeling like maybe they've watched a not completely irreligious film after all, but one that's being completely sincere in its thumbs up to the gospel as rewritten by the sexed up sapphic sorceress it imagines its main character may have possibly been. Just like with Elle, Verhoeven's films of this era seem bound and determined to keep sending audiences home with a distinct suspicion they might have just watched him and his anti-heroines really get away with something, but we're not exactly sure what. Either way, 9 out of 10, you guys gotta see this one to believe it.